So I'm always going to look at it because there's new ways of thinking, there's new technologies, there's new information that comes, and we want to be able to adjust and iterate on that.
My name is Matt Reiner, managing partner at Capital Investment Advisor, CEO of Wellness Strategies, an author, podcast host, and also a speaker to the wealth management community. My mission is to help every family in this country have access and be served by a human financial advisor. That we all have to live in the moment and not try to force progress too quickly. Let it happen and commit to a long-term strategy in your life, in your business, and in your investment portfolio.
And now, your host and my dad, Matt Reiner.
Welcome back to the FutureProof Advisor. As you can tell, I'm a little bit under the weather, but we're going to make it through this. My kids have passed their germs. They don't know how to cover their mouth. So I have a little bit of laryngitis, but we're going to go through because today we are exploring what truly separates thriving advisors from those who are simply surviving. And spoiler alert, it's not another designation after your name. And this somewhat hurts me, having designations. So here's something that will make every CFP and CFA, me included in the room, feel a little uncomfortable, is that your credentials might be holding you back. Not because they are worthless, because they're not, but because we've mistaken technical mastery for the actual skill that builds lasting client relationships. I spent 3 years collecting letters after my name, CFA and CFP. I was determined to prove I belonged in this business, to show how I had the intellectual horsepower to deserve a seat at the table. And then I sat in a 75-minute client meeting where I never opened my mouth. My dad, the firm's founder, a guy with a single fancy credential, not one single fancy credential, spent the entire time asking about the client's daughter's college decision, their father's health, and whether they still felt that knot in their stomach when the markets dipped, which they do. When the client left, they shook my dad's hand and said, "I always leave here feeling lighter, not smarter, not more informed, lighter." And I looked down at my notes, pristine notes, full of portfolio analysis and rebalancing recommendations, and I realized that I had prepared for the wrong meeting entirely. Here's what we're unpacking today. We're going to explore why 88% of affluent Americans believe helping with life purpose should be part of an advisor's role. Yet, 57% of people currently working with an advisor wish they better understood their own purpose. That gap, that is the opportunity. And we'll break down the specific soft skills that separate good advisors from indispensable ones. Skills like strategic silence, which I just used the other day, reflective listening, and knowing when you're crossing the line from coach to therapist. And we'll talk the uncomfortable truth. As AI commoditizes technical expertise, our moat as an industry, as advisors against disruption, is not a better investment strategy. It is the relationship itself. So the wealth management industry has been training advisors, I believe, backwards for decades. We pile on certifications because they are measurable, testable, and quantifiable. You know, a CFA proves you understand portfolio theory. A CFP designation proves you know financial planning. But neither proves you can do the one thing that actually matters in this business: make someone feel understood. And here's the shift that's happening right now. Whether we acknowledge it or not, technology is automating the technical work. AI can optimize portfolios, automate rebalancing, identify tax loss harvesting opportunities, and probably generate a decent financial plan. What AI will struggle with is genuine human connection, the ability to sit across from someone, look them in the eye, and say, "I see you are struggling with this decision, and here's what I'm noticing." You know, that is what technology cannot replicate. Clients are not firing advisors because of poor performance. Research shows that 61% of clients would leave due to a breach of trust, while only 54% cite poor performance. The number on the statement is never the real reason someone stays with us or leaves us. So, if technical expertise is becoming table stakes, what is the differentiator? It's connection, the relationship, the feeling that someone finally understands what money really means to them. Let me take you back to that meeting with my dad. I had just earned my CFA and CFP, walking around with my chest out, my shoulders high. I was proud. I was armed with quarterly performance reports in this meeting specifically. I was armed with market commentary. And I had a sophisticated risk analysis that I had spent hours preparing with my own Excel model that I had created. The client walked in and my dad started with, "How's Sarah's college search going?" Then it was, "I remember you mentioning your father's been having some health issues. How's he doing?" 75 minutes later, we still hadn't touched the portfolio. Instead, my dad had uncovered that the client was anxious, not about returns, but about whether they were making the right decision, letting their daughter attend school across the country. The market volatility they'd mentioned in passing, it wasn't really about the portfolio. It was about control, about feeling like life was moving too fast and they couldn't keep up. My dad never said, "Let me show you our Sharpe ratio or the beta or the alpha of the portfolio." He said, "That sounds really hard. Tell me more about what's making this decision feel so heavy." And when the meeting ended, the client thanked us, even though I'd contributed nothing, and they left. I sat there staring at my unused notes and had a real epiphany that changed everything of how I perceive this industry. And it's encouraged me to do what I'm doing here on this podcast of talking about this more often, is that we are not in the investment management business. We are in the business of helping people carry the weight of their financial lives a little more lightly. That's the skill my dad had, not the ability to explain modern portfolio theory, the ability to create space where someone felt truly seen. And here's what hit me the hardest. I had spent 3 years collecting credentials, trying to prove I was smart enough to be here, to serve these families. But the meeting I just witnessed proved that technical brilliance without relational depth is like having a Ferrari with no gas. Impressive to look at, completely useless in practice. So understanding the why behind a human creates a stronger foundation than optimizing the quote what. So let's start with what clients actually want, because what they say they want and what they actually value are two very different things. Clients may tell you that they want to beat the market, but research consistently shows this is surface level. What they truly value is a relationship built on trust, reliability, and feeling understood. Me and my team went out and surveyed 750 affluent Americans, people with over $100,000 in investable assets, and we asked them what they wanted from advisors. And the results were striking, even to me. 88%, that's a huge number for a national study, said that helping with life purpose should be part of a financial advisor's role. 81% wanted an advisor who connects life purpose to financial planning. And among those already working with an advisor, that number jumped to 87%, meaning that they want their advisor to connect life purpose to financial planning. But here is the gut punch. Here is the opportunity. 57% of people currently working with an advisor wished they better understood their own life purpose. Think about that. They're paying someone to manage their money while quietly desperate to understand why they're making it in the first place. This is where Bain and Fidelity's elements of value pyramid becomes super critical. It's built on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but for business relationships. At the foundation is this idea of functional elements: saving time, making money, reducing risks. At the peak is self transcendence and purpose. And what happens is that most advisors in our industry camp out at the base because it's measurable. We can point to portfolio returns, to tax savings, estate documents. But here's the uncomfortable truth: companies that deliver only foundational value are replaceable. They are the restaurant you can't quite remember the name of. The food was fine, but nothing memorable. The higher order elements, emotional, life changing, purpose driven, those transform transactions like portfolio allocation into relationships that people defend, even when the numbers temporarily disappoint. But here's the catch: you cannot start with purpose. Early in my career, I tried opening client meetings with questions about their deepest values and life meaning. I wanted to just go deep with them right away. And one client literally laughed and said, "Can we just talk about my 401k?" Clients come to us with surface level problems: allocate this portfolio, generate income, create me a plan. These needs are real. Solving them isn't settling, it's earning trust. It's like being invited into someone's home. First you knock and state what you're here for at the door. You prove you're competent with the basics, with a conversation. And then only after demonstrating this do you get access to the house where real life happens, where the conversation about what actually matters occurs. And the sequence matters. Build the foundation first, then elevate up towards purpose. There's this shift that we all as advisors, I think, need to make, going from fixer to coach, where we have to resist this writing reflex. Here's the hardest skill to master, and it's actually about not doing something. Stop trying to fix everything. As advisors, our primary instinct is to solve problems. Client mentions they're worried about retirement. We immediately start running Monte Carlo simulations. They're anxious about their kids' education. We build a 529 funding strategy and we're phenomenal at it. But this writing reflex, the urge to immediately provide solutions, is the single greatest barrier to deep discovery. Motivational interviewing is a concept in research that shows that clients are far more likely to commit to change when they make the case for it themselves. We've all heard this before. If you raise kids, I try it all the time, and it works when I can do it. A systematic review found that this approach outperforms traditional advice giving in approximately 80% of studies. Think about that. When you tell someone what to do, you're asking them to trust your judgment. When you help them discover what they want, they're acting on their own values. That's the difference between controlled motivation and autonomous motivation. Controlled motivation is showing someone a scary cash flow projection where they run out of money at 85. And it works temporarily. They take the action you recommend, but it requires constant external pressure. But autonomous motivation comes from intrinsic values aligned with purpose. It's the difference between exercising because your doctor showed you scary statistics versus exercising because you have discovered that you want to be the grandparent who can still hike with grandkids at 75. When clients understand their purpose and see how financial decisions serve that purpose, motivation becomes self-sustaining. They're not following your plan. They're executing their story. And this requires a complete mindset shift from here's what you should do to tell me more about what that means to you. From let me fix this problem to what would solving this problem do for you? The skills here are deceptively simple, but incredibly hard to execute. Some skills like strategic silence. This is the idea that after a client answers a question, count to 5 before responding. That vacuum creates not only awkwardness, but space for deeper, less rehearsed thoughts. Another skill is reflective summaries. Instead of asking another question, restate what they said. Say, so it sounds like your real goal isn't just the money, but the freedom to be present for your grandkids. That's reflective summaries. And the final one is question ladders. Move from surface facts to root values. The idea of saying you want a lake house, what would having that do for you? What's important about family togetherness? How does that connect to how you show love? These aren't tricks. They're tools for becoming a better guide instead of a smarter fixer. And I will tell you, these are tricks that are useful in any relationship that you want to build or strengthen as well. Building some soft skills is a pyramid. It's a pyramid of stance, micro skills, and methods. Not all soft skills are created equal. You can't jump straight to the advanced techniques. Think of it as a 3-level pyramid. Level A, the foundation, is core stance. This is your foundation, the attitudes and beliefs that you bring to every interaction. Again, all of these skills are not just for advisor-client relationships. It's for human-to-human relationships. They work across the board. That's the beauty of them. You can practice them in your business or outside of your business. And so the core stance starts with curiosity, genuine desire to understand the client's world, not to judge, fix, or sell, but to understand. It also is non-judgment, suspending your own values to accept the client's worldview as a value for them. This is something that we could all be better at in these days and times. Understand and accept them for what their values are, not trying to convince them. This is critical for surfacing information hidden by shame. The client must feel safe to be honest. You can't fake this. Clients can sense performative empathy instantly. So then once you have that foundation, you move to the second level, which is micro skills. And these are the techniques like empathetic listening, understanding the emotion beneath the words, not just the facts. It's emotion labeling, tentatively naming what you observe, like saying, you sound frustrated by this. And then strategic silence, that 3 to 5 second pause we talked about. And finally, permissioning. This is the idea of asking if we can go down a path. The idea of saying, is it okay if we talk about where you two might differ on this when you have a couple inside of the building or inside of your office? These are building blocks for deeper conversations, which then allow for you to go to more comprehensive frameworks or structured methods. This is the peak of the pyramid. This is the idea of the concept or framework called ORs, open questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries, where we're now combining them all and putting them into practice. Or you can use what I'd like to use often, value clarification exercises, like a card set. Go through this, find your top values, and then we're going to whittle it down to your top 5. Or my son's favorite game, the 5 whys, right? This is the question ladders. You keep asking why on every question 5 times to get beneath the surface level problem. The mistake most advisors make is trying to start at level C, using a framework without mastering the underlying stance and micro skills. When you do that, when you just jump straight into a structured methodology, it feels robotic. It doesn't feel authentic. Clients sense that you're following a script instead of genuine listening. And then ultimately you get frustrated because it doesn't work, because it's not, you don't know the skills or the attributes necessary to go deep. You're just using a template. So you have to master the foundation first. Curiosity and non-judgment are not optional. They are the prerequisite for everything else, for every relationship that we create. And you need to start there before moving up the pyramid. So the other question that I get really most often when I talk about this material to other advisors is, aren't we crossing the line into therapy? It's a really legitimate concern. And the answer is very politically correct. It depends entirely on what your goal is, right? Here's the distinction. I'll walk you through 2 ways of thinking about it. One is what I call in scope, which is advisor as a coach and how that looks. And then I'll walk you through the therapist role, the out of scope aspects, and some of the things that would look in that nature. The in scope side is where we are going to be exploring values, purpose, and meaning as they relate to financial decisions, identifying behavioral patterns, overspending, risk aversion, and co-creating action plans. This is where we're also using coaching skills to build motivation and confidence to implement the financial plan, as opposed to just telling them to do it. And then this is also where we're discussing emotions as they relate to financial decisions. Like, for instance, how does market volatility make you feel about your plan? So that is all in scope advisor as a coach. But what's out of scope look like? What is that crossing of the line? Well, this is where a therapist probably makes sense, right? Is diagnosing mental health conditions. You seem to have clinical anxiety. Like that is crossing the line for what we are. Processing or exploring the origins of past trauma. Tell me more about your childhood. Let's unpack that abuse. Like that is crossing the line. And then treating clinical conditions like depression, anxiety, addiction. So, our job as an advisor is to be the film director, taking the scattered footage of a client's financial life and helping them see the through line. How the decision to buy less house in their 30s connects to the ability to work part time in their 50s to care for aging parents and to be present with their older kids, maybe. Or how funding their daughter's education without loans connects to their parents' sacrifice a generation earlier. We create narrative coherence. We don't diagnose or treat psychological conditions. When a client says, my spouse and I aren't connecting on this retirement vision, I think I might be depressed. That's your cue. You validate saying, that sounds frustrating and lonely. It's important to have support for that. And then you boundary. My role is to make sure the financial side is secure so you have the freedom to work on the personal side. But for the disconnect you're feeling, can I offer a referral to a counselor I trust who specializes in this exact transition? That's the boundary. You protect your client by not pretending to be an expert you're not. And you solidify trust by showing that you know your limits. And the final area to look at is this idea that shame is the silent obstacle and psychological safety is the solution. So let me tell you about the most common barrier to honest financial conversations. And it's not what you think. It's not lack of knowledge. It's not complexity. It's not even fear of market volatility. It's shame. Clients feel shame about not knowing more. They feel shame about their debt, shame about past financial mistakes, fear of being judged for asking stupid questions. We can tell them that there are no dumb questions until we are blue in the face, but that doesn't change the feeling. When someone says, this is probably a dumb question, but, or you're going to think I'm crazy, or they nervously laugh when discussing money, that's shame showing up. If you ignore it or dismiss it like, oh, that's not a dumb at all, or anyway, you've just confirmed their fear. You've moved past it because we feel comfortable. You felt comfortable in that situation. I've done it many of times. So instead, what we should do is validate and normalize. We should say something like, this is not a dumb question. It's a great question. Money is full of complex jargon. My job is to be your translator. Please ask me 5 more questions just like that. This is where psychological safety becomes critical. It's a state where the client feels safe to be vulnerable. And you create this through the idea of permissioning, the idea of saying, to the client, this part of the conversation might feel different. It's normal for couples not to be 100% aligned. Can we talk about where you two might be different or might differ? We can do pacing. Let the client set the speed, especially during difficult topics like grief or family conflict. I mean, I just went through this with a family member of a client who is declining very rapidly. And I let her run the conversation. She had a lot of emotional moments, and I used the pausing and the pacing and let her cry and let her share more. But I understood her more. And I know that conversation, I didn't give her much advice. I just let her talk, and it connected us. And it gave her strength. And that's the idea of pacing. But you also have to have non-judgment. And we've talked about this multiple times because it is the most critical component. We all must genuinely accept others' worldview as valid for them, even if we would make different choices. That is a must for these conversations to work. So here's the progression. Start at the surface, like I call it snorkeling with them, right? We're snorkeling. We're looking down from above. We're surface level. And then as trust builds, we plunge a little deeper, maybe down to 1,000 feet, a little bit deeper, and eventually we earn the right to scuba with our clients, getting to the depths where you truly understand them. But if you try to drag them to scuba depth on day one, they will panic and they'll never come back or they never feel safe. You earn access to the deeper kind of rooms or the deeper depths by proving you're trustworthy in the entryway or at the surface level of the water. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happens to our industry over the next decade. AI is obviously part of the picture. It will reshape how we work, what we deliver, and what clients expect. But here's what keeps me optimistic instead of anxious. AI will struggle with one thing humans are wired to need: genuine human connection. People might form attachments to AI assistants, they might even prefer them for certain tasks. But there's something irreplaceable about sitting across from another person who sees you struggling and says, I notice this is hard for you. Let's figure it out together. The moat against disruption isn't superior investment strategies or more sophisticated planning software, it's the relationship itself. The connection that makes a client stay even when the portfolio is down, that makes them refer their friends, not because of returns, but because you just have to meet my advisor. The industry was built around portfolio management because that was easiest to see and measure. But just because something is measurable doesn't mean it's meaningful. The opportunity is not to abandon the foundation. Portfolio management, financial planning, risk management, we still need technical competence. But we have to see those as the entry point, not the destination. And here's the uncomfortable question that I want to leave you with. Are we hurting ourselves with our confidence in our technical skill? What might happen if we invested the time we spend chasing the next credential into honing the soft skills that actually differentiate us? The truth is, being in this business means we already know how to build relationships, but we take it for granted, I believe. We assume it will always be there. And in doing so, we risk losing the very thing that makes us indispensable. The data is clear. Clients want purpose-based planning. They want advisors who help them understand not just what to do with their money, but why it matters. They're asking for this deeper level of service. Some of them are desperately screaming for it. And the question is whether we all, as an industry, will develop the skills to deliver it or keep defaulting to what's easy to measure. Our clients aren't portfolios that happen to have people attached. They are people with purposes, trying to figure out how money fits into the lives they're still learning how to live. So, if today's episode resonated and you loved hearing my voice, forward it to a colleague, share it with your team, leave a comment about which soft skill you're committed to developing. And also answer our one question poll in the episode notes. The question being, what's the biggest barrier preventing you from deeper, purpose-driven conversations with clients? So thank you for spending some time with me. Thank you for bearing through my voice today. It means the world to me, and I'll never take it for granted. Go out there, be part of the change that betters our industry. Stay well, be well, and keep on exploring.